Nobody expected Tom Hanks to say that. The host tried to corner him, but what happened next silenced the entire studio. The interview started off polite, even playful, but the moment the host asked Tom Hanks a loaded political question, the entire tone changed. What came next was so unexpected, so powerful. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Tom Hanks has always been America's everyman. The guy next door with a warm smile, a quick wit, and a knack for playing characters who feel like they could be your neighbor, your friend, or even you. From the wide-eyed innocence of Forrest Gump to the resolute courage of Captain Miller in Saving Private Ryan, Hanks has built a career on quiet strength, relatability, and an unassuming kind of heroism. He's not the actor you associate with fiery drama or polarizing headlines. He's the one you trust to deliver a performance that feels human, grounded, and true. So, when he agreed to a live interview on one of the major networks, a primetime slot on a show known for its glossy production and high-profile guests, no one anticipated anything but the usual. A bit of Hollywood charm, some nostalgic banter about his decades-long career, maybe a few light-hearted stories about his latest film. The audience, both in the studio and at home, settled in for a comfortable evening with a familiar face, the host, a seasoned journalist with a reputation for weaving political agendas into even the most casual conversations, started off smoothly. She complimented Hanks on his new movie, a heartfelt drama about a small-town teacher navigating life's challenges. They shared a laugh about his early days in Hollywood, trading quips about his iconic roles and the enduring popularity of Big. The studio audience chuckled along, clapping at all the right moments. It was classic Tom Hanks, easy, affable, and effortlessly likable. But then the atmosphere shifted. The host leaned forward in her chair, her smile tightening just enough to hint at what was coming. Her tone, still polished but now laced with intent, took on a new edge. She adjusted her note cards, glanced at the audience, and fired her shot. "Tom," she began, "you've got this incredible platform, this massive influence. Don't you think actors like yourself have a responsibility to use it more to speak out against political injustice? Especially when it comes to issues like gender inequality and systemic racism in America?" The question hung in the air like a tripwire. It was a classic media trap, carefully crafted to corner him. Agree, and he'd be roped into endorsing a specific political movement, complete with its slogans and expectations. Disagree, and he risked being labeled indifferent, out of touch, or worse, insensitive to the struggles of marginalized groups. The audience held its breath, sensing the tension. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of expression on his face. For a moment there was silence. Tom shifted in his seat, his hands resting calmly on his knees. Then, with the same disarming smile that had carried him through countless roles, he spoke. "I think my job is to tell stories," he said, his voice steady but warm. "Stories that make people think, feel, maybe even see the world a little differently. I don't believe in shouting slogans just because they're trending or because someone hands me a script for what I'm supposed to say. Real change doesn't come from yelling louder than the next guy. It comes from listening, really listening to people's lives, their struggles, their hopes." The host blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of his response. The audience, still processing his words, remained hushed. A few exchanged glances, unsure whether to clap or wait for more. Hanks leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed, but his gaze direct. "Look, I'm not saying there aren't problems, big ones. But we've got too many folks in Hollywood acting like they've cracked the code on how to fix the world. Meanwhile, out there, real people are grinding to pay their rent, to get decent health care, to put food on the table for their kids. They're not sitting around waiting for a celebrity to tell them what to think. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending we have all the answers and started asking better questions." The silence in the studio deepened, heavy with the weight of his words. The host, sensing her narrative slipping, tried to pivot. "But Tom," she pressed, her smile now a touch strained, "don't you think silence on these issues is part of the problem? Isn't staying neutral just another way of avoiding accountability?" Hanks didn't flinch. He leaned forward, his voice still calm but now carrying a quiet intensity. There's a difference between silence and humility, he said. I'm not here to add to the noise or join an echo chamber where everyone's just parroting the same lines. I believe in doing good, not just talking about it. You want to make a difference? Show up for people, help where you can. Listen to someone who doesn't look like you or think like you. That's harder than tweeting a hashtag, but it's real. For a split second, the studio seemed frozen. The host's smile faltered, her usual playbook of follow-up questions rendered. Useless, the audience, still grappling with the raw honesty of his words, hesitated. Then, from the back of the room, a single pair of hands began to clap. Slowly, others joined in. Within moments, the applause swelled, tentative at first, but growing into a wave that filled the room. Some stood, others nodded in agreement. It wasn't a roar of blind adulation, it was the sound of people, recognizing something rare, truth spoken without pretense. Tom Hanks didn't bask in the moment. He didn't flash a triumphant grin or milk the applause. He simply nodded, almost imperceptibly, and took a sip of water as the clapping subsided. The host, now visibly scrambling to regain control, steered the conversation back to safer ground, something about his next project, but the energy in the room had shifted. The audience wasn't just watching a celebrity anymore. They were witnessing a man who refused to play the game. By that evening, clips of the interview were everywhere. Social media platforms lit up with reactions. On X, users posted snippets of the exchange, some hailing Hanks as the last honest man in Hollywood, and others praising his guts to stay human in a world of media puppets. One viral post read, "Tom Hanks just reminded us what integrity looks like. No shouting, no posturing, just real talk." Another user wrote, "In 90 seconds he said more about humility and listening than most activists do in a lifetime." Of course, not everyone was pleased. Some criticized him for dodging a firm stance, accusing him of both sidesism or failing to use his privilege to amplify specific causes. A few pundits penned think pieces about how his response was disappointingly vague or a missed opportunity to lead. But the backlash felt hollow next to the groundswell of respect from people who saw his words for what they were. A rejection of performative activism and a call for something deeper. Tom Hanks didn't respond to the noise. He didn't jump on X to clarify his comments or engage with the praise or criticism. He didn't need to. His words had spoken for themselves, and he wasn't chasing viral fame or public approval. He was doing what he'd always done, staying true to himself, both on and off the screen. In a world where actors are increasingly expected to double as activists, where every interview is a minefield of political traps, Tom Hanks offered a different kind of example. He showed that character isn't built by shouting the loudest or picking the right side in a polarized debate. It's built by standing firm in who you are, speaking with dignity, and trusting that authenticity resonates more than any rehearsed talking point ever could. As the weeks passed, the interview faded from the headlines, replaced by the next big controversy. But for those who'd watched it unfold, it left a lasting impression. Not because Tom Hanks had started a movement or sparked a revolution, but because he'd done something quieter and, in its own way, far more radical. He'd stayed real.